Anyone who's just tuning in, hopefully you've had a chance to catch the documentary shorts program, which just screened. My name is Travis Drew. I'm programming manager for this year's festival. And we're lucky enough to be joined by Carol Nguyen from No Crying at the Dinner Table and Jamie Meltzer and Chris Filippone from Huntsville Station. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us. So I guess let's start with the Huntsville Station team. How did you find out about this particular sort of ritual that occurs?
I can jump in first. So I had been just doing research on some film ideas just around reentry programs, and had somehow come across like a photo essay about this sort of main release prison in Texas for the whole state of Texas, Huntsville Penitentiary. And as the main release point, inmates sort of exit and leave and go to the Greyhound station, and that's where they kind of sit and wait and have their first moments out. And it just seemed like a really charged and kind of surreal and peculiar kind of space, and something that might be worthy for, you know, making a short film about. And I had spoken to Jamie, who was my professor at the time, and Jamie had actually already made a previous film that was in Texas, and he had shot outside of that prison once before. So in our conversations, we kind of said, hey, let's maybe take a chance, go down there and see if we can make a film. I don't know if you have more, Jamie.
Yeah, a similar reaction to just seeing the space of the bus station. It was just seemed so interesting of a kind of situation where the parolees who'd been released are kind of in between incarceration and freedom, and they're in this space for a limited period of time. So it did seem perfect for the short format. So I was kind of excited that Chris was also interested in the topic, and we just dived into it basically without knowing too much about it.
Well, yeah, I wonder if you could talk more about the approach to the form, because I feel like you know, conventional wisdom would be like the more time you spend with a figure in a documentary, the more compelled the audience will be, or the more the audience will feel that they can relate. But this film really is just a patchwork of very small stories, and yet I feel like it's so powerful because of that. And I wonder if you could talk about why you decided to approach it that way.
Well, yeah, I think part of it is like with any film, you know, the content kind of dictates your approach in some way, and the form. I mean, in certain ways, it locks you in. And we shot over, I think, 8 or 9 days, actually, 2 different trips, and then cut the film together, as you just saw, where it really represents one, you know, day, one moment of time unfolding. And I think we probably had the same reaction as what you just said. I mean, you know, we were very worried that we wouldn't be able to achieve a kind of intimacy, but we found that the camera actually worked as a kind of catalyst to provoke people to open up in a way that they really weren't opening up even to one another in that space. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of that opening up that the camera kind of allowed, I mean, in the, you know, the American prison system, it's hard to outwardly express emotion when you're within the system. And so us, you know, we kind of, with the camera, were providing maybe even like a sort of pocket or space where people could really reflect openly and show their sort of vulnerability that they kind of had kept in. And I think the film sort of you see that within the film. Simultaneously, too, I think, you know, for some folks who were released, the experience was just so big for them. And, you know, our presence became a little bit of a small sort of part of that in some ways. And it really allowed for us to get, you know, proximity and get a little bit closer and really capture what you see in the film.
Yeah. Well, Carol, I wanted to ask you sort of a similar question about the genesis of the film. It's a very different project, but it is also, in a way, a film about getting people to open up. And I wonder if you could talk about where the idea was sparked to make this film about your family.
Yeah, well, While I was doing research for a fiction film I was going to make, I came about their stories just by the conversations and the discussions we had. And it really struck me because I'd never heard of these stories before, stories that were so intimate to them. And I went through this kind of rabbit hole of trying to understand the assimilation of love through generations and communication, but also the barriers that prevent that, the barriers that kind of taught me how to cry silently when I was younger, to avoid anyone from knowing, to keep that facade up. And so I wanted to not only share their stories, but also find a way to put us in a vulnerable situation to make real change, and not just talk about it, but address it directly. And so that's the genesis of it.
Yeah, and at what point did you decide not to just sort of ask your family to speak on camera or on tape, but to incorporate this element of them listening to themselves and to each other tell these stories?
I think that was quite early in my process. I think in immigrant families and in bicultural families, there's this big barrier of communication that is language, that's culture, and then that's also external forces that prevent us from just absorbing something 100% and understanding. And there's a power to listening that I learned that allows you to be present and be there without an exchange and that barrier. So I kind of wanted that reveal to have that moment for everyone.
Yeah. And has your family had a chance to see the film and have that extra level of reveal?
They have. I showed them the film before it went out to festivals and the big screen. And for them, it wasn't a big surprise or anything anymore, because they were a part of the film. So they knew what was going to happen and everyone's stories. I think for them, they're just shocked at how of the universality of their stories and how many people can relate. Because for them, these are just normal stories. These are them. They're not big stars or anyone important in their eyes, but there's a universality to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And clearly, I mean, the film is played at many festivals at this point, both in person and virtual, and it seems like people really respond to it. So thank you, and thanks to your family for sharing. Going back to the Huntsville station guys, I wonder if you could talk about, so it's not an overtly political film. There's no text, or there's very little text sort of explaining what's happening. It's more about just observing. But I wonder if you could sort of talk about whether you view it as a political film, or what the relationship to the issue of incarceration in America is.
Do you want to take that, Chris, or do you want me to?
I was going to let you start this one.
Okay.
But
Well, I think, it's true. We didn't really look at it in that context, but I think we're both very passionate about, thinking about social issues, but we also are interested in using cinema and documentary in a maybe a different way. And I think also the short format, going back to that, I mean, that really affords you a different approach than you might take in a feature film about the criminal justice system or this parolee release and recidivism set of issues maybe. And what we were really going for here is just immersion and hoping that kind of leads people to see prison in a different way. It could just be something really, really small and just sort of like connecting with people and empathizing. But we really wanted, even though it's a short film, to kind of draw out the moments and really sort of like, even though it's really a small time that you get to know any of the individuals, you actually spend like a fair amount of time relatively for the short format. just sort of like observing them and connecting with them. And so I think that was our hope. And I definitely see that as political. I mean, not a prescription of how to make change, but I still think it has a sort of political force to it.
Yeah, and just following up on that, I think, our goal really was to create something that, was immersive and experiential, and that ultimately, through the process of watching the film, that you're able to empathize on a human to human level with those who are on screen, and some sort of cross that barrier in some ways of the film and subject viewer divide in some capacity. And in that respect, I think it's political. And I think also in the kind of what I said earlier in terms of, within the prison system and within the prison context, when you're inside, the outward expression of emotion is something that's really, you can't really afford to do it under those circumstances, in that situation. So to be able to even capture, and even for us, just be present in those moments where that came out was, those first sort of exhales, those first sort of moments of emotional release. It's political in that way, but it's very much on a very human level of experience.
Sure. Well, we do have an audience question, which was sort of similar to the question I'd asked Carol earlier, but for Huntsville Station, have you been able to show the film to anyone who was featured in the film, any of the subjects of the film?
We haven't yet. We've been making the rounds of festivals and showing the film. And I think part of it is just a function of how the film was made, that we really had this very deep connection with a lot of the people, actually, but very temporary. And also it was, obviously a few moments after they were released from prison, all of them were going to a halfway house and then to somewhere else. So we have, the initial contact information on a release form, but it's very hard to know how to get in touch with anyone in the film. So we just haven't yet sat down, and I think we both would really like to with some of the people, just because it was such a profound connection, like Chris was talking about. And I think just as much as you would have on a feature, in a way, you just really kind of connected in these moments as filmmakers with your subjects. And and then we live with them for a really long time in the edit too. I mean, so I feel like I know these people in a special way, but I wonder if some of them even remember the filming.
Yeah, I'm sure they had a lot on their minds at that time. So yeah, that's fascinating though.
And I just wanted to add too that I think on the release forms, I mean, they didn't even have phone numbers. So it was like and some of them are heading to places that they'll only be at briefly. So I guess we'd have to mail letters individually to all these different places and be like, where is this place? Yeah, we haven't gone through that process just yet, but.
Yeah, well, you have some time. So Carol, a question that I had for you, rewatching the film, it was striking to me, I guess I hadn't noticed the first time, just how, because the scenes that are interspersed with the dinner table scenes of your family, just sort of, your sister taking a bath or your mother cooking, these sort of mundane activities, it struck me the second time how beautifully and carefully composed those shots were and how intentional they felt. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your approach to those sequences.
Totally. So those scenes were actually staged. And what I wanted to get across by these mundane moments was more of that moment where you're just completely lost and alone and your thoughts are wandering. And when you see someone in this moment, you're just wondering, I wonder what they're thinking. Like, I wonder what my dad is praying. And moments like that cannot be captured through documentary because you would be totally disrupting that. So I wanted to stage that through fiction and to also emphasize the kind of isolation that everyone is going through emotionally, even though they're so physically close to each other in this house. And to capture those moments, I tried to put everyone kind of in like their natural habitat. So my mom cooking, my dad in the living room, my sister smoking. And And even to this day, my parents don't know that my sister smokes. And when they watch the film, they're just like, oh, it's a fake cigarette. Carol just got her to smoke for the film. But, it's something personal, private, and that she does in her life. So I wanted to disperse those to kind of counteract with the thoughts that they're saying and put that facade on.
Yeah. So we have another audience question. Let me just read. Is it difficult to separate, and this is for all the filmmakers, difficult to separate you from preconceived notions or prejudices when shooting or editing a documentary? Do you feel like you go into it with a planned narrative? And anyone who has an answer to that can respond.
I mean, I think that to me is like the essence of documentary, that there's this sort of interplay between kind of the work that you do before you get to a location, and for Chris and I, it was very planned in one respect. We really, even the first shot of the film, we actually really pre-visualized what we would call like a Lumiere film, like a Lumiere take where the workers leaving the factory or something like that. And then we shot that, 7 or 8 times over that many days. And then, of course, most of the film was very unexpected. And over the course of shooting it, we had to pivot quite a bit when there was some disappointment even at times. Oh, we really expected this to happen. And people aren't opening up to us. Like, what do we do to get them to open up, and trying different strategies. So for me, there's this quote that I talk to students about in the documentary program at Stanford where I teach, and it's I think it's a Robert Bresson quote about like there's shooting is going out to meet the unexpected, and I think it's something like there's nothing in the unexpected that isn't secretly expected by you. So it's kind of like this thing that you've kind of pre-visualized in some way. It happens usually differently than you might imagine it, but in a way it sort of fulfills the core theme and like the important aspects of what you're usually trying to do with the film.
Yeah, and I just want to say too that especially with Huntsville, there were certain moments and things that, I mean, you could have never anticipated at all. Whether that's the snippets of things about Cologne, or where the first bus comes and leaves and there's that sort of quiet moment towards the latter half of the film. And that was something that we just discovered in the process of doing it, that like after this first bus leaves and some folks don't have a ride, some folks are waiting for the next bus, and but things sort of just quiet down. And I mean, with documentary, naturally, you're submitting to the will of the world in some capacity. But it's amazing how, things can really surprise you and really take on the idiosyncratic aspects of your film in a way that like you could never plan. And that's part of the art form. So it's exciting to go through that process and kind of submit your will to what's sort of happening and working within that.
Yeah, I would say, like Jamie said, in documentary, I feel like you go into it with pre-visualized shots or writing, or at least something that you want to say. And through the production and all the random and unexpected things that happen, that's what you deal with in montage, but you still have that seed of what you're trying to say that will direct that unexpectedness. So with that Bible, it helps you get through and make the tough decisions.
Yeah, of course. Well, as we're sort of wrapping up, I just wanted to know, as documentary filmmakers, how have the last several months or the better part of 2020 affected your practice, and what are you looking forward to in the future? What are you working on? Whoever wants to answer.
I'm happy to. I don't have a good answer, but I feel like for me, because I'm a parent and I have 2 small kids and they're in school, and I'm teaching over Zoom and they're in different rooms, and it's just there's on the one hand there's like no time to think about anything weirdly, but it's like time is also obviously slowed down the way it has for everyone. And I feel like it would be a great time to reflect on one's practice and on the next step that one wants to do. But it's also very hard to do that because it's such a difficult, challenging time. So I'm just hoping to get through this time and kind of like thinking about like just sort of simplifying the practice of filmmaking, and like and that means, you know, sort of different things, but just sort of not try not to be too anxious about the fact that everything's sort of been completely disrupted in terms of how you would normally make a documentary. And yeah, those are the kinds of things that are thinking about.
Yeah, I'm sure that's easier said than done, not getting too anxious. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I mean, it's just been a weird year to release a film because we were fortunate enough to premiere in Berlin and attend. And then the moment we got back, like South by Southwest was canceled. And then it was just like a domino effect, of course. I would say, I mean, it was difficult for a million reasons because being a filmmaker, you know, there's not always a lot of money around and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do for work? And, you know, everything's sort of collapsing. But in a way, I mean, it's been interesting to sort of embrace this online model in terms of distribution of the short, and just being part of festivals in that way. And it's exciting to know that like a lot more people are actually seeing the films than they would, you know, having to attend a festival in a physical room, even though I sort of prefer that. Yeah, I've just been focusing a lot on editing my partner's short film and starting to really reflect and think about what like a first feature might look like for me. And that's what I sort of plan on doing through the winter, and hopefully begin shooting spring, summer, and continuing on.
Hopefully.
Yep.
For me, I graduated into the pandemic, so I have no idea what's normal to how you should adult. So it's been very strange. No Crying has got a lot of traction and has really pushed my career past graduation. And it's been strange to accept a South by Southwest award online. It's been strange to collaborate with a production company and work with big funding for the first time and not meet my crew, but work through Zoom. And, you know, there are no rules now. So I have to kind of dig in and like, okay, what do I think is right? What do I want to do? And it's so scary because there's no standard in my world. I guess that's kind of a blessing because you get to create your own rules and your own path, but then how do you compare yourself to what is normal? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's I'm looking forward to seeing what all of you work on in the future, but it is for sure a unprecedentedly strange time. But all that being said, so glad that we were able to share both of these films with Philly audiences, and really happy that we were able to talk to you. So thank you all, Jamie, Chris, and Carol, for taking the time to talk tonight. And thank you everyone at home for asking questions and watching along. But yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Have a great night, and good night, everyone at home.
Night.
Hi, everybody at home. My name is Travis True. I'm programming manager for the Philadelphia Film Festival. And we are really excited to be joined by the filmmaking teams behind two of the documentaries in our documentary shorts program, My Father the Mover and Blackfeet Boxing. So yeah, if you guys could just sort of introduce yourselves. We'll start with Kristen.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kristen Lappas, and I am the co-director of Blackfeet Boxing Not Invisible.
Tom Rinaldi, Kristen's a partner on the project and always thrilled to try to swim in her runoff.
Hi, nice to meet you both. I am Julia Jansch, and I am the director for My Father the Mover.
Well, yeah, thank you all for being here. And this was sort of a scheduling coincidence that I'm talking to the teams behind these two films, but they do coincidentally sort of have some themes in common. They're both about figures who are trying to inspire young people in their communities through two different activities, both of which kind of involve physical movement. But so let's start with the Blackfeet boxing crew. How did you find out about this this class in Montana, and about Frank's efforts to teach the young women on the reservation how to defend themselves?
Kristen, you take that, please.
Okay. I was actually on a flight coming back from another film shoot, and I happened to put on the film Wind River, which is fictionalized, but it's about a young girl that goes missing in Wyoming. And the film ends with this graphic over black that says that while there are missing and murdered statistics for every other demographic, none exist for Native American women. And no one knows how many are missing. And it was such a chilling way to end the film. And it just kind of stuck with me. And, you know, the next day I got home and I just started researching and reading and learning about the missing, murdered Indigenous women crisis in our country. I'm embarrassed to say that I really didn't know much about it before watching Wind River, but in my research and you know, reading, I happened to stumble across a photo essay in the Billings Gazette, which is a small paper in Montana. And in the photo essay, there was a picture, I'll never forget it, of two young girls silhouetted sparring in the boxing club. And it says, Frank Kipp teaches young girls to fight for their lives. And being a producer at ESPN and ESPN Films, I was like, this is such an incredibly inspiring, you know, story, and I want to go out there and see, you know, what's going on. So, you know, I called Tom right away because we're, you know, we're partners on so many stories that we do for ESPN, and I kind of told him about the gym and ran it by him, and he was obviously intrigued as well. And we were on a flight a couple of weeks later to meet Frank and the girls at the gym.
Wow. So what was the process of filming like? How much time did you spend with Frank and the girls in the community?
Tom?
Well, let me back up, if it's okay, just and take us off track for just one moment, and just to say that we're excited and humbled to be part of this film festival, but in particular, I can't tell you how much I love Julia's film, and I know Kristen did too. And it was a great gift in our day when certainly in my day, when Kristen passed along the link. And from the opening frames of the film until it concluded, it's hard to describe, but I just found it inspiring all kinds of different feelings. And at core, I think, as you mentioned at the start of this panel, at core, I was struck by, despite how incredibly different the circumstances and geography and physical location is of the settings where these stories unfold, I saw so much common ground there. And I know that Kristen did too. And I thought that was just remarkable to see. In the grounds that we ended up filming in this reservation in Montana, I echo Kristen to say that the MMIW crisis in our country is not something that I knew very much about at all. I had been on reservation lands for other stories that I had done prior in my career at ESPN, and prior to that as well, in other places I worked. But to see Frank's effort through that lens, and to know that Frank himself had this organic journey, himself a boxer, always an advocate for his people, always dedicated to trying to improve life on the reservation, to do it through this sport that he's so impassioned about. But then himself to discover, we're having more and more girls come in, and teenagers and young women, and Frank realizing the vital role that the boxing club could play for that population, because given some of the work he had done in law enforcement and as a parole officer, to understand all the terrible vulnerabilities for that population, this was a way Frank felt like, I can do something with a passion of mine to help protect and serve this very vulnerable and marginalized community. And that's really what led us to Montana. And we were thrilled to be there with the Seventh Movement, did just a spectacular crew. And the time that Kristen and I spent there as it unfolded through different seasons, bitter cold, it was just we wanted very much to make this setting a character. And through the gift of having Seventh Movement with us, we tried to do that.
Yeah, no, you certainly captured something of the experience of living in Montana and the sort of roughness of that. But I imagine that was a really moving experience to spend so much time with that group of girls and with Frank, and in particularly Mamie is such a compelling figure in the film. Did you sort of know when you met her that she was going to take on sort of some importance within the film's arc? Or is that something that you just sort of watched kind of play out?
I think from the beginning, we wanted to see if we could highlight a couple of boxers and trace their journeys of aspiration based on their potential, as Frank described it. But from the moments we first saw Mamie box and met her until ultimately the arc that unfolds, I'll go to the moment that for me, Kristen's really central to, which is the last times in the film that we hear from Mamie. And I'd ask Kristen just to talk about what an enormous challenge that was.
Yeah, so I mean, as Tom mentioned, Frank pointed her out the first day we were there. He was like, she is our most promising female boxer. She's Olympic caliber. She has such a bright future ahead of her. And just talking to her, she was like wide-eyed and excited and kind of felt like she was unstoppable at that point. It was so amazing to see the confidence that she held. And then obviously as the months progressed and we continued to film out on the Blackfeet Reservation, Mamie's journey kind of took an unexpected turn from where we thought she was headed. And as a filmmaker, you know, you start to develop relationships with these people, obviously. And so when we find out that she's missing and that she hasn't returned to the club, you know, as a person, as a human, when you're reporting and telling the story, you're concerned. You want to make sure she's okay, but you also know that her story mirrors so many of the young girls who end up going missing. And so it was really important for us to make sure that we captured kind of her journey and where it was going, because it is so similar to Ashley Loring Heavy Runner and many other girls on the reservation. When we were there in June of 2019, we didn't expect to see Mamie. She had been, you know, she hadn't been to the gym in 5 or 6 months. And we just happened to see her, you know, shooting hoops on a basketball court outside. And obviously we went over and we asked if she was comfortable with our cameras, you know, recording her a little bit, and asked her to sit down with us and just kind of tell us where she was at. And it was one of the most challenging interviews that I've ever conducted in my career. Just because I had seen this bright-eyed young girl that had everything in front of her, and the woman that I'd sat down with in June was just a totally different person. It was really upsetting that she had given up on her dreams to be a boxer. And, you know, we wanted to make sure that we were concerned and making sure that she was okay, but at the same time reporting, like I said, this very important issue, and how she's almost like a sign of what can happen when you're in an environment that you're not supported. She was dealing with a lot of drugs and alcohol in the home, and a bad situation at home. So it was a really tough spot to be in. But I do think that interview was really important in order to kind of you know, convey a lot of the themes of what the film was about.
Yeah, well, and really quickly, have you kept in touch with Mamie since then, and has she had a chance to see the film?
Yes, she has. She has gotten a chance to see the film, and we last spoke in, I think it was June. You know, her family has kind of moved around quite a bit since we stopped filming. She's no longer living in Browning. She's kind of moved to a different part of Montana. So her journey kind of continues to unfold. But I really hope, and I tell her this all the time, that she gets back into the ring because she is so promising and has so much potential.
Yeah, she definitely, I think Frank says she has the fight in her eyes or something along those lines, and you definitely see that from the beginning. So Julia, pivoting to My Father the Mover, sort of similar question. Obviously, you highlight such an unusual and inspirational figure. How did you meet him or become aware of him?
I just also want to preface by saying I feel like we're in such good company with Tom and Kristen and Blackfeet Boxing. And I, just echoing what Tom was saying, it's so well programmed because, you're focusing on a type of movement to transform and to heal and transcend and make a difference. And, whether it's boxing or gum dancing, it's very nicely programmed together. So I'm very happy to be on this panel with you both. So your question was how I came upon Stone, Move Galena. I actually wanted to shoot a music video and was wandering around trying to find a dancer to help with choreography. And my co-producer, Mandy, said he knew of this one choreographer on this one gum show, very much a behind the scenes guy. And I said, okay, well, let me sit down with him. And we sat down and I kind of went on and on about my vision for the music video. And then long been dancing, and he said, I'm not a dancer, I'm a mover. And I was immediately intrigued, and I said, tell me more. And he said he calls himself a mover because yes, he dances, but what his heart compels him to do is to move kids in his township from a state of believing they'll never be anything more than what their current circumstances predict for them, to stepping into their shoes and finding their superpowers, in his words. And so he uses movement to move these kids from one state of being and thinking to another. And I was so taken aback in that instant and immediately parked the music video idea. And I just there and then in that meeting, I just said, yeah, would you be interested in telling your story? And he was very taken aback, to be honest, because he's a behind the scenes guy in a small township, and he uses a school which the classrooms are not in there's no class on a Saturday, so he uses that school on a Saturday, and his classes are free, and he's more grassroots of a character you can't get. So for someone turning up saying, let's tell your story, he was quite shocked. But yeah, we decided we would tell his story. And a week later, we went off because we had to rally pretty fast. And I crewed up, and we, with a very intimate crew, we went into his community with him, into his home, into his dance classes. And it was only upon arrival that we met his daughter, Alata. And I said, who's this? And he said, no, this is my daughter, Alata. And I said, is she also in the dance classes? And he said, no, she's not in the dance classes. And then we discovered that why she wasn't in the dance classes. And we decided together that, yes, it would be a documentary about his work, but on a deeper level, why not put Alata through the program, so to speak? And it became My Father the Mover. So it came about so organically. And I think that it's been a lesson to me, because often with my projects, I go so strictly by the book or by the script or by the brief. And when you let things breathe a little bit, and when you're open to just magic happening, and I think oftentimes they take, you go out of the controlling the wheel so tightly of the driver's seat, and it's like something bigger takes over that's better for the project, the filmmakers, the featured subjects. And that's definitely what happened with this film. So it was a big lesson to be learned.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a beautiful sort of hybrid of there are elements of music video. We get to experience the beauty of the dance, but at the same time, you do have this amazing story, and it's so moving and cathartic at the end to finally see his daughter dance. So it's amazing that you captured that. Has Stone or his daughter or any of the other kids, have they had a chance to see the film too?
Yes, we've had a couple of wonderful screenings. I'm actually in South Africa at the moment, and we did a screening at the Labia, which is a local cinema here, and the whole community came, and Stone spoke to everybody afterwards. And yeah, I mean, they're all very excited because nobody thought, even when we made it, we thought we'll do this documentary, but it's doing extremely well. And we're very excited about it. And it's been acquired by MTV and Sheila Nevins, and it's winning in great festivals. And, you know, you guys have seen its merits, and we're all a little kind of dumbstruck, to be honest, especially Stone and especially the kids in his community.
Yeah, well, that sort of leads me to my next question, which is sort of what do you hope that the lives of these two films will be, and what sort of do you hope to inspire in your audience, either just emotionally or in terms of like actual change?
I just wanted to go back for a second to something that Julia touched on, and that I think is such a wonderful victory in the film. And the film has a wonderful intimacy, and that intimacy has to be based on trust. And you know, I know for Kristen and I know that our ears are really pricked up when we hear her say, we go in, we have a plan, sometimes we grip the wheel, and in doing so, the blood kind of drains out. We're white knuckling it, and we're thinking that we've got to follow these paces and this schedule, and this is our shoot plan, etc. And what a wonderful sort of instruction to get, to say that we do need to have time for soul and space to unfold. And in doing that, wow, maybe we're fortunate enough that some magic can happen. And through trust and through intimacy, we are able to deliver upon that. And that's what I think Julia did. I also know that for Kristen and I'm, you know, to know that you're able to show the film and have the subjects watch it, perhaps even with others around them, and have others now see them through a different lens, is a remarkable experience that filmmakers don't always get. We had that opportunity as well. The film debuted in Montana in front of, you know, several hundred people, and Frank came with Ember and other members of the gym and the boxing club, and to see their reaction, to watch them seeing themselves on a large screen, and then to have others stand and give them an ovation when the film concluded. That's such a beautiful moment. And then to have Frank and Ember and Donna and others come up and field questions about their experience. What a wonderful gift as a storyteller to be able to be the connective tissue there between a community and a broader audience, a community that perhaps doesn't have a voice or isn't always seen. And I know that for Kristen and I, we've worked on projects where we have tried to amplify issues and voices in communities that perhaps don't always receive that attention. That's one of my hopes, to answer your question, that simply to try to create awareness for MMIW, MMIP, the fact that this is happening. And there was pending legislation, which is now beginning to move forward which is really important on a federal level to serve these communities and create greater opportunities for justice. And yeah, in one sense, it's a story about a boxing club and a gym, but in another sense, if we can create change through awareness that a documentary can help serve that community, that's a huge, huge win for us.
And I just really quickly want to add one thing to what Tom was saying about trust, and how beautiful it was to see the family watching their film at Big Sky Film Festival in Montana when it premiered. When we first got to the reservation, there was a lot of skepticism and people were not sure whether they wanted us to tell their story. They had felt like there had been other media outlets that had come to the reservation and they had kind of promised things and kind of taken and portrayed their culture in a really negative light. And so that trust was so important to establish, that like we wanted to show the beauty of this place. We wanted to show the positive things that were going on in the gym. And it was definitely like an ongoing journey to try to figure out, to keep reminding them of that and to keep building that trust. It's funny, I tell people this story all the time, but the last time that we were on the reservation, which was a year from the first time we visited, we filmed the boxing awards, the end of year boxing awards. And after we turned the cameras off, I was actually 7 months pregnant, and Frank brought me up into the ring and he blessed my baby. He gave me an Indian name, which is a huge honor, handmade clothes. It was like such an emotional moment for me to kind of be accepted into that world. So it just goes to show that trust is so important. And I know, Julia knows that, and all filmmakers know that how important trust is. And then just one other thing that I wanted to add in terms of what we hope the film can do. Two congresswomen, the two only Indigenous congresswomen in the history, Congresswoman Halland and Congresswoman Davids, are both really supporting the film, which is so exciting to see. It's so obviously it's an issue that's very near and dear to both of their hearts, and to have them come on board and support us has been such a wonderful thing. And so we hope that we can continue to work with them, the people that can actually make the changes, and continue to help with those things.
Absolutely. And Julia, for you, what do you hope that the film will inspire in the viewer, and how can they sort of continue to support Stone and the kids?
I think, one of the reasons I really want to tell Stone's story and the story of the United Township dancers is because here's a guy who's operating on such a grassroots level that at that trajectory, in terms of getting support, resources, awareness for what his cause is, it's kind of, the graph is going like this. And there's so many movers and shakers, just like Stone, who are moving mountains in their communities, but lack the access, the awareness, the resource to scale and to do bigger work, because their work is so important. And so one of my main goals for telling his story was to put a spotlight on it in whatever way I could. I didn't think it would travel as far as it did, which is great, but just any kind of platform for him would have been helpful to him and his cause. That being said, we're talking about trust, and it's such an important thing that, both Tom and Kristen are also putting a spotlight on, because as these documentarians, we have such responsibility, because we are putting the lens on their work and their lives and their selves. And so, the trust to be authentic and to tell it the way they would want to tell it it's such a sensitive thing, and it has to be treated with such care. And so, I really involved Stone. It felt like very much a kind of synergistic, it's like we were working together to tell the story. But the other thing I hope for this film, which is more of a kind of a not selfish, but this is more tied to my psyche and myself. I've always been so charged and inspired by the concept of freedom. Because I think that we can be burdened by, our socio-economic or political situation, but we can also trap and chain ourselves. And I think we all have demons and we all get in our own way. And I certainly have had my fair time of, getting unchained from whatever I've chained myself to in my psyche. And Stone says such a key statement in the film. He says, everyone can have freedom. It just depends on whether you want to be free or not. And I feel that even though these are kids in the southernmost tip of Africa in a township dancing to the very niche boom African electronic movement, his message and his methodology really hit a nerve. And I do think that it's a universal message. And my hope is that people all around the world watching this film will be inspired to think that they too can move through whatever chains they are facing, you know, whether it's, I don't know, an addiction or a bad relationship or some you know, mental construct, confinement, you know, anything that's unhealthy and that they want to be free of. Stone has a tattoo on his arm, and it's of a puppet whose strings have been severed with scissors. And I really, you know, when he actually told me, I asked him about it in our first meeting. And I said, what is that? And he told me about it, and he told me it's to remind himself that he always can cut those strings, whether it's fears, rules, and he says in his words, so I can become me, and he can unleash who he is. And I'm certain that that will strike a universal chord. And so I guess to answer your question, I just hope this film just really inspires, no matter where you're sitting in the world.
Well, and I think it already has, and it will continue to. And I'm so glad that both of these films, it seems like, will have the ability to really travel and have the support of, you know, ESPN and MTV, and as well as many festivals that are bringing them to people around the world. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed at home. And thank you guys again for taking the time. Thank you for sharing these stories and these people's stories with us. And thank you for taking the time to talk today. This has been really, really fun.
It's a privilege to be here. Thank you for having us.
Of course. All right. Well, thank you again, and have a good day.
You too. Nice to meet you, Kristen and Tom, as well.
Bye.
Bye.